The janitor set down his mop, meeting her eyes with a calm that shook her more than any boardroom. "I have the same MBA you do, Ava," he said softly, and in that instant, everything she thought she knew about success began to crack. The rain came in sideways off Elliott Bay, needling the glass of their Belltown office, and Ava Sterling, thick, curvy, and unapologetically elegant in a navy sheath that hugged her like conviction, stood with a pen between her fingers, breathing through the tremor that always arrived right before impact. On the whiteboard, Port of Seattle RFP circled 3 times. Below it, Malik's clean hand. Process, pedigree. Dignity isn't a perk. Numbers don't care about your country club. "You're grinding your molars again," Malik said, setting a paper cup by her elbow. His tie was crooked in the way that made her want to reach for him. His eyes were the steadying part of the room. "Sip, or I'll revoke your spreadsheet privileges." "What would I be without my spreadsheet?" she asked, taking the coffee. It was too hot, too bitter, and exactly what she needed. "Still you," he said. "Which is the point?" They were an hour from presenting to the Port's Investment Committee. A blind pedigree pilot scaled to real money. Win this and Hayes and Sterling would fund their community workshops for 2 years. Lose it, and they'd keep scraping by on referrals and grit. Ava checked the packet again. Risk bands, fee structures, the paragraph she'd rewritten a dozen times to say what she meant without apology. In her phone, 3 unread texts from her mother. "We're proud of you. Be safe. Do you need anything?" She typed, "I need you to believe me," and deleted it, replaced it with a heart. Down the hall, their team gathered Coates. Sierra, the kitchen table quant whose models beat bigger firms by not lying. Jose, the former teacher who could explain options to a room that didn't know it needed options. May, whose rebalancing scripts ran like prayer beads through volatile weeks. Family, Ava thought, surprising herself. Not the kind she'd inherited, but the kind she'd chosen. "Cabs in 5, Malik said. He hesitated, then reached to straighten the line of her blazer at the shoulder, a small, intimate fix that sent a bright shock through her, not lust so much as belonging. "You ready?" "I'm terrified," she said honestly, "which usually means I'm alive." The Port's conference room looked like all conference rooms that believed their size could substitute for their soul. Wide table, bad art, water pitchers sweating into coaster rings. At one end sat 7 people in practical clothes. At the other, the representatives from Apex Meridian. Robert Ellis turned as Ava entered, and there it was. The narrowed gaze that had taught her to be small to stay safe. She did not shrink. The chair, a woman with silver hair and a voice that made everyone sit straighter, began. "We've reviewed the written materials. Today we want to hear what you do differently, and why that difference won't put retirements at risk." Apex led with pedigree. "Our stewardship is proven," Robert said smoothly. "Our clients are people like you. We understand their world." The words slid through the air like an old song. Comfortable, unexamined, wrong. When it was Ava's turn, she stood without notes. The dress moved with her like trust. "We don't sell comfort," she said. "We sell clarity. Our process is transparent, and our compensation requires your outcomes to be good, not your dinners to be pleasant. We've built models that assume the world will not stay as it is because it never does, and we will teach your members what we're doing with their money in language that respects them." "Everybody says that," one committee member muttered. Malik stepped in, voice low and precise. "Then let us show you." He walked them through the blind pedigree pilot. Portfolios constructed without the bias of brand names, tested against stochastic stressors, beating the benchmark and Apex's composite by 61 basis points with lower drawdown. He didn't apologize for their size. He didn't apologize for his coveralls past. He simply set the truth on the table and let it breathe. Sierra answered a question about tail risk so cleanly the committee's actuary put down his pen and actually smiled. Then the question they'd expected arrived, wrapped in a softer tone that made it sharper. "Cultural alignment matters," said a man in a fleece vest. "Our members want to feel like they're in good hands." "They are," Ava said, "because our hands are on the work, not the wine list. The word you're reaching for is familiarity. Familiarity feels safe. Sometimes it's a synonym for exclusion. We won't flatter you. We will perform." It wasn't a mic drop. It was a hand extended to the part of the room that still knew right from easy. The chair's mouth did something like a fight not to smile. "Thank you," she said. "We'll deliberate." Outside, rain stitched the air. On the sidewalk, Malik didn't perform pep talk. He walked beside her until the city's noise softened to the wash of tires and gulls. "No matter what they pick," he said, "you told the truth without leaving bruises." "I wanted to leave bruises," she said, "just small ones." He laughed, throat warm, and something unwound in her. "Promise me something," she said. "If we lose, we still do the South Seattle workshops, even if it means I sell half my wardrobe." "Deal," he said, "but not the green dress. That one is company morale." Back at the office, the team dispersed into the nervous chores of waiting. Ava went to the break room and found the vacancy still in her hands, the shape of a future that might say not yet. She thought of Malik's grandmother, a woman she'd never met, whose proverbs had rebuilt her spine. Persistence as prayer. Fall forward. Don't mistake silence for peace. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered because courage had become a habit. "This is Port of Seattle," the silver-haired chair said. "We're splitting the allocation. Half to Apex, half to Hayes and Sterling. We expect quarterly teaching sessions. Your blind pedigree guardrails are to remain intact." Ava leaned against the counter, eyes blurring. "You won't regret it." "I expect not to," the chair said, and hung up. She found Malik by the whiteboard, Sierra and Jose and May already reading her face. She didn't make a speech. She just nodded, and the room broke open. Noise and laughter, and the little quiet relief that feels bigger than victory because it lets you rest. Someone turned on a tinny speaker. Someone else brought out cupcakes that looked like they'd been decorated by a kindergartner. They tasted like joy. When the team spilled out into the wet evening, Malik stayed. He leaned a hip on the second-hand conference table, the one they'd polished into something like grace, and watched her the way he did when the world fell away. "Half isn't half," he said. "Half is enough." "It is," she said, "and I want more." "Ambition," he said, approving. "Yours taught mine manners," she said, and stepped closer until she could see the tiny scar near his jaw she'd never asked about. "I have to say something before I talk myself out of it again." "Say it." "When we started this, I told myself we couldn't risk us, that we had to build the company first, that feeling what I feel would make me careless." She took a breath that felt like diving. "But I'm not careless. I'm careful enough to tell the truth. I want my life to include you in ways we haven't named." He didn't blink, didn't save her with a joke. "Ava," he said, like it was a decision. "Me too." It wasn't cinematic. No orchestra swelled. He reached for her hand and she let him, and it was more binding than any contract she'd signed. They stood in a room they'd made from nothing, while rain tried its best to baptize the windows, and she felt the strange, clear peace of a choice that matched the person she'd become. Later at the community centre, where the chairs were still scuffed and the coffee still terrible and the gratitude still cathedral size, a girl in a red hoodie stayed after class. "How do you become you?" she asked, clutching a folder of loose-leaf dreams. Ava smiled. No performance, no polish, just the tenderness she'd started learning after she stopped needing marble. "You learn the rules so you can do the work. Then you look up and ask who the rules leave out. If the answer is a person you love or a stranger who looks like someone you love, you change them. You will fall. That's not failure. That's the body finding where its real balance lives." Outside, the storm slowed into a mist that made the streetlights halo the sidewalks. Malik locked the van and came to stand beside her. "We're late for nothing," he said. "Perfect," she said. "Let's be late together." They walked without hurry under a sky that finally felt big enough, past windows reflecting them back, her curves in a yellow dress that didn't apologize, his height an easy shelter at her side. The glass was smudged in places, the way glass is when it's been touched by human hands. The picture was perfect anyway. A ferry horned. Somewhere a gull laughed. The city carried on with its loud, ordinary hope, and Ava held on to the only measure that had ever mattered, the one she'd been too afraid to write on a slide, that the work and the love were the same motion now, forward, forward, forward. The storm didn't let up all night. Rain battered the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ava Sterling's Capitol Hill apartment, streaks of water racing each other down the glass like nerves she couldn't quiet. She had pulled her resignation letter from the printer an hour ago. It sat now on her coffee table, paper trembling whenever the HVC kicked on. Beside it, spread wide as temptation, lay the Halverson contract. 7 figures in fees, the smooth glide to vice president. 2 documents, 2 futures. Her chest ached with the weight of choosing. She poured herself a glass of wine and didn't drink it. Instead, she picked up her phone and hovered over her contacts. Her mother had called earlier, voice full of pride and bafflement. "Sweetheart, Patterson's boy works in facilities. Maybe you know him," she'd said. Ava had swallowed her sigh then. Now she replayed the words with a strange tenderness. Her mother had no idea that the man she meant, the janitor in coveralls, was the one tilting her whole life sideways. The buzz came at 9:42. "Malik, I heard you asked about me in facilities today. Word travels fast." She stared at the screen, pulse spiking. Then she called. He answered on the second ring. "Did you really recommend me for an analyst role?" His voice was steady, but underneath was something taut. "Yes," Ava said, "and my supervisor made it clear it would be problematic." Silence. Then a low exhale. "You don't have to fight my battles. This isn't just your battle anymore. It's mine too. I can't unknow what I know now." She looked down at the resignation letter, her name sharp in black ink. "I can't keep pretending the system is fair just because it worked for me." He didn't answer right away. She thought maybe she'd overstepped. Maybe she'd sounded like another executive looking for a redemption project. But then he asked quietly, "What would you build if you left?" The question opened a door she hadn't let herself see. Something smaller. Something that doesn't worship pedigree. A firm where merit means what it should. Skill, performance, not wine lists and golf memberships. She hesitated, then said it before her courage ran out. "I'd want you to build it with me." There was a pause, then a low chuckle that sounded more like disbelief than amusement. "You'd leave a sure thing to start from scratch with a janitor?" "I'd leave a lie to build the truth with a man who's more qualified than half the people making decisions upstairs." Another pause. Then, "If we fall, Ava, we fall hard. Then we fall together," she said, and finally drank the wine, the burn in her throat cleaner than regret. The next morning she walked into Robert Ellis's office with her letter. He was grey-haired, crisp, the kind of man who carried the city's old money in his cufflinks. He read the page, expression blank. "You're throwing away a partnership track for what? Some crusade?" "For integrity," Ava said. Her voice didn't shake. "And for the people this firm refuses to see." Robert leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Clients expect polish. They need advisors who make them comfortable." "Comfortable how? You know what I mean." "No," she said. "Say it." The silence told her enough. "Don't let idealism ruin you," he said finally, pushing the letter back. "Take a week to reconsider." "I don't need a week." She slid it closer to him and walked out with her spine straight. By the time she got home, Malik was waiting outside her building, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. She let him in without a word. They sat at her kitchen table, her resignation letter between them like a third presence. "You're serious," he said at last. "Yes? You don't even know if anyone will follow you." She smiled wry. "Then I'll be the firm's only client. I've been my own investment before." He shook his head, but his mouth curved, reluctant, amazed. "You're reckless. You're worth it," she said. For the first time since she'd met him, Malik laughed with something like joy. They rented a second-floor suite in Belltown, exposed brick and scuffed floors. No marble, no mahogany, just space and possibility. Hayes and Sterling was born with 2 laptops, 1 whiteboard and a mission Ava wrote in permanent marker. Process over pedigree. Results over connections. Dignity isn't a perk. They recruited misfits. Sierra, the data analyst passed over for not being client-facing enough. Jose, a former teacher who explained derivatives with chalkboard clarity. May, who'd built models in her kitchen after leaving an Ivy internship to care for her father. Each of them had scars from doors slammed for fit. Each of them brought brilliance. Clients came slowly. A retired engineer who wanted his pension to last longer than his knees. A widow who cried when Ava explained her finances without jargon. A small business owner burned by banks who only cared about his collateral, not his story. None of them cared about golf clubs or wine pairings. All of them cared about trust. At night, after the others left, Ava and Malik worked side by side. Sometimes silence was their language. Sometimes it was Malik's grandmother's sayings, drifting like scripture. Persistence is prayer. Fall forward. Don't mistake silence for peace. Ava wrote them on sticky notes and lined them along the monitor, little neon commandments. One evening, she caught herself watching Malik instead of the spreadsheets, the scar along his jaw, the calm in his dark eyes, the way his broad shoulders bent toward the numbers like reverence. She thought, not for the first time, falling isn't failure. Sometimes it's the only way to rise. Malik noticed her gaze. "What?" "Nothing," she said, flushing. He didn't push, just smiled, small and knowing. 6 months later, the Seattle Business Journal invited her to speak at the Rising Leaders Breakfast. She stood in front of a ballroom of suits, her curves hugged by a sapphire dress that dared them to underestimate her. Malik sat in the back in a charcoal suit, no longer the man in coveralls, but the partner she'd chosen. "Good morning," she began. "Until recently, I was the youngest regional manager at Apex Meridian. Now I co-found Hayes and Sterling. I walked away from a clear path to partnership, from marble lobbies and guaranteed security, because I learned something I couldn't unlearn. The system I thrived in wasn't fair. It gave me opportunities it denied to others equally qualified. People like my partner, Malik Hayes." Gasps. Whispers. She went on, voice steady. "We founded a firm where merit means results, not pedigree, where we see dignity as a requirement, not a perk, where falling isn't the end but the beginning of something new." The applause rose slowly, then caught fire. She saw Robert Ellis in the crowd, his expression tight. She smiled at him, not cruel, just unafraid. Afterward, Malik joined her on stage. "You were fearless," he said. "I was honest," she replied, "for once." He touched her hand, briefly, as if testing whether the world would let him. It did, and the warmth of it was more binding than any contract she'd ever signed. That night, as they locked up their small office, Ava paused at the window. Seattle glowed, wet streets reflecting neon and promise. Malik stood beside her, shoulders broad and steady, his presence a gravity she no longer resisted. "You asked me once," she said softly, "if you should be the one falling this time." "And you said yes," he murmured. "We both did." They looked at the city stretching beyond them, messy, flawed, alive. And in the glass, their reflections blurred together, no longer manager and janitor, but partners who had chosen to fall into something uncharted and call it flight. The first call came at 6:11 a.m., before the sun lifted the lid off Elliott Bay. Ava woke to the ringtone she reserved for institutional clients and the sudden certainty that the day would tilt. She answered with her voice still rough. "Sterling," said the chair from the port of Seattle, calm as winter water. "We had an overnight shock. Freight corridor strike rumors, futures off, wild pre-market chop. A few trustees want to move to cash. We need you here by 9. "We'll be there by 8:30, Ava said, already throwing back the covers. "Don't sell $1 until we talk." She dressed fast, black pencil skirt, white silk blouse that didn't hide her curves so much as make them non-negotiable, and texted the team. Malik responded first, "On my way. Bring the scenario deck and the tea." At the office, Sierra had 3 monitors glowing with charts that looked like seismographs. Jose was printing one-page explainers in a font large enough for the back row. May was running stress tests like rosary prayers. Malik handed Ava a travel mug. "Your saints blend," he said. "Caffeine and courage." "Strike talk started on a private truckers forum at 2:17, Sierra said. "Half rumors, half leverage. We ran our supply chain shock model. Baseline expectation, 2 to 4 days of volatility, mean reversion when union negotiators go on camera. Tail risk if it spreads to the ports." "Everybody loves to panic in the dark," Malik said. "We'll turn on the lights." They made the port by 8:27. The conference room that had felt adversarial weeks earlier now held a tight, frightened energy. The fleece vest trustee, skeptical then, pale now, drummed fingers against a legal pad. "We should have stayed with Apex," he muttered. "They'd have hedged this." "They did," the chair said dryly. "Last quarter, into underperforming high-fee funds." Apex's team sat at the far end, polished and hungry. Robert lifted a hand in a movement that read magnanimous until you watched his eyes. "Volatility exposes naivete," he said to the room at large. "Our clients hire us to avoid surprises." "No one avoids surprises," Ava said, standing. "We price them. We prepare for them. We refuse to sell fear when it's cheapest." She didn't use slides. She used the whiteboard and a black marker that squeaked in the quiet. "Here's the rumor timeline," she said, drawing a line with timestamps. "Here's news confirmation. Here's union posture softening. Here's implied volatility spiking and already fading in the options chain. This, she circled a jagged fall, is a discount attached to breadth. If we sell breadth, we pay twice. Once on the way out, again on the way back. Malik stepped in with the model. We've pre-routed rebalances for cash-needy accounts, he said. We'll trim winners, not panic sell losers. We're placing protective bids under quality names at fire sale prices. And we will call every retiree who asks to explain why doing less today is the most disciplined action. Everybody says discipline, Fleecevest shot back. What about results? Last quarter's pilot outperformed Apex by 61 basis points with shallower drawdown, Sierra said, steady. We do this with transparency. That's the result. I don't need your performance theatre, Robert cut in, smile thin. What our friends here need is reassurance. They need respect, Ava said, turning to face him fully. Respect is an allocation and an explanation, not a sedative. The chair's mouth twitched. We'll hold, she said. If anyone wants to exit, you call me first, then Hayes and Sterling. Outside the room, Malik leaned his shoulder against the corridor wall and finally let out a breath. You didn't flinch. I wanted to, she admitted, but then you handed me tea and a spine. He grinned and texted the team. Hold. Execute Plan Delta. Call List A. By noon, the rumour softened under cameras and microphones. By 2, futures had righted. The phone at Hayes and Sterling rang for hours. Jose explained, patient and plain. May ran fills and confirmation. Sierra added a footnote to their manual. When the market screams, answer with a whisper and a plan. At 4, the article dropped. Apex had fed the journalist the angle they wanted all along. Seattle's pension goes to school. The diversity experiment, managing your retirement. There was a photo of Ava at the Rising Leaders podium, mouth open mid-syllable, eyes fierce. There was a photo of Malik from 3 years ago, grainy in navy coveralls next to a mop sink. The caption did the dirtiest work with surgical politesse. From janitorial to fiduciary, a rapid rise raises questions. Ava felt the blow in her sternum. She read the story anyway. It never lied outright. It didn't have to. It braided insinuation with the softest words money buys. She carried her phone to Malik's desk. He'd already seen it. His jaw was tight. The vein at his temple pulsed like a metronome set too fast. I am so, she began. Don't apologize, he said, voice flat. They wanted this picture. Let's make a better one. The chair at the port called within the hour. We've read it, she said. I assume your numbers are still your numbers. They are, Ava said. Then the piece can compost in yesterday's recycling, the chair replied. Deliver the scheduled education session tomorrow. We'll handle trustees who prefer innuendo to math. Ava sat down hard. Gratitude pricked her eyes, not fragile, just bright. Malik reached across the desk and covered her hand with his. He didn't squeeze. He just stayed. That night, her father called. He was a teacher who had always believed in tests as ladders and hard work as rope. I read the article, he said, careful. Is it true? Is what true? She asked, pulse spiking. That you chose a partner because of who he is, not what he can do. I chose Malik because of what he can do, she said, the words clear as glass. And because of who he is, I won twice. Her father was quiet for a long time. She heard the clink of a mug. I'm proud of you, he said finally. Even when the world punishes you for telling the truth out loud. The next morning, they did the education session under unforgiving fluorescent lights and a clock that ticked loud enough to be rude. Ava wrote on a whiteboard until her hand cramped. Malik explained credit spreads like weather. Jose told a story about his father's pension that stripped the shame from ignorance. A trustee in a ball cap cried just once into his knuckles and didn't apologize. Afterward, a man in a suit who had sneered at their first meeting approached Malik, face set in an expression that wanted to be contrition and landed somewhere near exhaustion. I called you the janitor, he said, out loud, in a meeting. He swallowed. I was wrong. I was a janitor, Malik said evenly. It's honest work. So is this. The man nodded, eyes wet. I'm learning. Outside in the corridor, Robert waited, back straight, smile loaded. You can ride outrage for a quarter, he said softly, but money returns to comfort. Then we'll make comfort out of clarity, Ava replied, and out of outcomes. He stepped closer. You can still come back, Sterling. We'll put the embarrassment behind us, call it a sabbatical, a personal odyssey. You're built for our rooms. I changed the rooms I'm built for, she said. They have more chairs now. He glanced at Malik, let contempt naked itself in a single flick of his gaze, then left. At lunch, the firm took sandwiches to the pier and ate with their feet swinging above the water. A gull stalked Jose like a creditor. May offered it a shred of lettuce. It declined, insulted, and barked at them until Sierra surrendered a crust. Ava watched Malik watch the bay and caught the line of fatigue around his mouth. "You okay?" "I'm tired of being the anecdote," he said, "but I like being the answer." They bumped shoulders. It felt like a vow. Back at the office, a message sat in Ava's inbox with a subject line that made her stomach flip. Northwell Biotech, Strategic Mandate Opportunity. It was the kind of private client that turns small firms into categories. She opened the deck. It glittered with possibility and poison. On page 9, the impact sleeve routed funds through a shell that traced 3 subsidiaries down to a company chaired by a Northwell board member's brother. The communications proposal suggested shelving all public community workshops to conserve brand gravity and minimize reputational blending. In a highlighted comment bubble, "We prize discretion. Cultural statements uncorrelated to alpha light our hair on fire." Malik read over her shoulder. "How much?" he asked. 150 under management, immediate." "How much soul?" "All of it." He didn't say decline. He didn't have to. She closed the laptop and sat with the silence until the fear stopped yelling and the mission could be heard again. "We pass," she said. Her voice did not wobble. "We're not a costume you put on to launder ethics." "Good," Malik said, and kissed her temple the way someone blesses a thing that's working. The room was quiet when the next email arrived, minutes later from the port's chair. Board vote scheduled for Friday to expand blind pedigree mandate based on performance and education outcomes. However, Apex filed a formal complaint, forcing a compliance review and RFP refresh. "You'll need a full supplemental package in 72 hours. If your process is what you say it is, you'll be fine. Show us." Ava read it twice, then looked at Malik. His smile was not small. It was the expression he wore when the problem matched the life they'd chosen. 72 hours. He said. "Tea," she said. "Process," he added. "People," she finished. They rolled their chairs to the whiteboard, uncapped their markers, and began to write the kind of answers that don't perform, they prove. Outside, the bay threw back the last light of the day. Inside, the second-hand table caught their reflections. 2 figures bent over work they refused to betray, already moving as if the vote had begun. The office lights burned through the night, markers squeaking against the whiteboard, laptops overheating on the second-hand conference table. Hayes and Sterling's 6-person team moved like a pit crew in a race they couldn't afford to lose. "Stress tests first," Sierra said, hair tied back, fingers flying over her keyboard. "We need to show how our blind pedigree portfolios hold up under supply chain, interest rate, and currency shocks." "Already on credit spreads," May muttered, her eyes flicking across 3 screens, graphs strobing in rapid color shifts. "If the committee asks about volatility clustering, we'll have it." Jose stacked fresh printouts in neat piles, each stapled with a yellow cover sheet. "Plain language summaries," he said. "No one's reading a regression table in real time." Malik leaned on the edge of the table, sleeves rolled, his broad shoulders carrying the same steadiness he had in coveralls years ago. "Clarity, not theatre. Every answer has to point back to our process." Ava was on the phone with a potential ally. "We're not just managing money, Senator. We're modelling transparency. If the port mandate expands, it sets precedent. Public funds run by performance, not pedigree." She listened, nodded, and scribbled a note. "Friday vote fragile. Apex lobbying hard." By dawn, the office smelled of burnt coffee and marker ink. Ava's blouse clung to her curves with a kind of exhaustion that made her feel almost transparent. Malik dropped a protein bar in front of her. "You're forgetting to eat again," he said. She tore the wrapper with shaking fingers. "I'm forgetting to breathe." "You're not allowed to fall over until we win," he teased, but his eyes carried concern. Her laugh came out raw. "What if we don't?" "Then we start again," he said simply. "Failure isn't the end. It's another spreadsheet." Friday came too fast. The port's boardroom was packed. Trustees, compliance officers, Apex executives gleaming in bespoke suits. The air carried the heat of tension and too much bad coffee. Reporters hovered at the edges, pens ready. Robert Ellis, Apex's silver-templed executive, stood with the smooth confidence of a man who had never been told no. The compliance review is simple, he told the room. Hayes and Sterling is untested. One market tremor and they gamble with retirements. We propose a full return to established stewardship. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Ava felt them like small cuts against her skin. The chair cleared her throat. Miss Sterling, Mr. Hayes, you have the floor. Ava rose, the sapphire dress hugging her frame, curves carved sharp against the sterile light. She didn't reach for slides. She reached for the marker. This, she said, drawing a jagged line, is the strike rumour last week. Panic, headlines, traders running like the building was on fire. Apex would have you believe stability means selling into that fear. We didn't. We held. We bought discounts. Our clients are already positive on the rebound. She turned, eyes sweeping the table. Stability is not safety theatre. It's discipline, it's process, and it's respect. Malik took over, his calm voice cutting through the murmurs. Blind pedigree allocation means we evaluate assets without knowing if they come from Goldman, BlackRock, or a community fund. It means no bias toward pedigree. It means results without disguise. Here are the numbers. Sierra clicked a remote and 3 graphs flashed. Hayes and Sterling's portfolios outperforming Apex's composite, lower drawdown, cleaner variance. The data glowed undeniable. Robert smirked, unshaken. Numbers can be dressed up. What about cultural alignment? Comfort? Do you understand the world our retirees live in? Ava's temper spiked. She stepped forward. Our retirees live in a world where every dollar matters. They don't need us to mirror their dinner parties. They need us to protect their futures. If Apex wants to sell comfort, they should open a hotel. We sell competence. A silence spread, heavy and electric. The chair tapped her pen once. We'll recess for deliberation. The team spilled into the hallway, nerves jangling. May sat on the floor against the wall, head in her hands. Jose paced, whispering prayers. Sierra was already updating a contingency model in case of defeat. Ava leaned against the wall, chest heaving. Malik stood beside her, close enough that she felt his heat. You were fire, he said softly. I was reckless, she whispered back. You were honest. His eyes locked on hers, dark and steady. That's rarer than safety theatre. She exhaled, trembling. If they vote us down, then we'll still know we told the truth out loud, he said. That matters. Her throat tightened. You make it sound so simple. It is, he said, when you're not alone. For a moment the boardroom and the city outside vanished. There was only the steady gravity of his presence, the pulse of something between them she hadn't let herself name. The chair's assistant appeared in the doorway. They're ready. Back inside, the air was tighter, expectant. The chair lifted a sheet of paper. The board has voted. The blind pedigree mandate will not only continue but expand. Hayes and Sterling will manage 40% of the port's pension fund. Gasps. A ripple of disbelief. The chair's eyes softened. Your performance is your defence. Deliver again, and politics won't matter. Ava's body sagged with relief. Malik's hand found her shoulder, firm, grounding. The room blurred, the applause distant, but his touch was sharp as a promise. Robert Ellis stood jaw tight, mask cracking. This isn't over, he muttered, brushing past them with a chill of cologne and fury. Ava didn't look at him. She looked at Malik, who was smiling. Not cocky, not surprised, just proud. That evening, the office became a riot of joy. Pizza boxes piled, cheap champagne sprayed across the brick wall, laughter echoing. Sierra danced barefoot on a chair. Jose toasted in 3 languages. May cried quietly into her sleeve. Ava slipped to the window, the skyline glittering like a prize she hadn't asked for but had earned. Malik joined her, 2 glasses in hand. To falling, he said, raising one. She lifted hers. To falling up. They drank, and when she set her glass down, she didn't step back. She stepped closer, her shoulder brushing his. The warmth lingered, electric, terrifying. I keep thinking, she said softly, about the first time you walked into that conference room. How sure I was of who I was and who you were. How wrong I was. And now? Now, she said, voice trembling but true, I'm sure of nothing except that I don't want to do this without you. His hands slid down to hers, their fingers interlacing like the simplest answer. The office roared behind them, the city roared beyond. But in that quiet space at the window, they stood as something more than manager and janitor, more than co-founders. They stood as 2 people who had chosen to fall, together, into a future that was theirs to write. They moved into the bigger space on a Tuesday because Tuesdays made no promises, just work. The new office had clean white walls, a view slivered by the rusted girders of an old sign, and a lobby that smelled faintly of lemon oil and hope. The second-hand conference table came with them, its surface buffed to a deeper sheen, and Ava Sterling, thick, curvy, and unabashed in a fitted ivory dress that meant business, stood with a level in one hand while Malik adjusted the frame of a new plaque above the whiteboard. Process over pedigree, results over connections. Dignity isn't a perk. Left a hair, she said. He nudged the nail. Now? Perfect. She stepped back, satisfaction warming her chest. The port mandate had expanded. The calls hadn't stopped. Their calendar was a braid of portfolio reviews and community workshops, of quiet handholds through market noise and louder, prouder teaching in rooms that smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. They were busy in the way that felt like a life, not just a firm. Sierra wheeled in a rolling cart stacked with binders. Education kits, she said. Text large enough for the back row. Jose said big fonts are dignifying. Jose followed with a crate of pocket calculators that looked indestructible. 20 for Rainier Community Center, he announced, and the rest for the Union Hall on Jackson. If anyone complains about decimals, we're switching to pies. May ducked around them, phone at her ear. Yes, Mrs. Dominguez, she murmured. No, you don't have to sell. Yes, I'll explain it again, slowly. She covered the mic and smiled at Ava and Malik, a little helpless, a lot happy. By mid-morning, the elevator dinged. Ava turned and stopped. Her parents stood in the doorway holding a plant they'd overwatered on the way. Her mother wore pearls and the nervous smile of a woman meeting the future wearing yesterday's map. Her father, still in his school tie, looked like he'd graded late and come early anyway. Surprise, her mother said, voice bright, eyes scanning the modest couches, the scuffed baseboards, the plaque. We brought a fern. A very hydrated fern, her father added. Ava crossed the room, hugging them both, inhaling chalk dust and perfume. Thank you for coming, she said. She'd told them about the port vote, about the article, about none of it, and all of it. She hadn't told them how much their approval still snagged at her ribs. Where's the young man? Her mother asked. The one with the beautiful voice on the radio interview. Malik. I'm here, Malik said, wiping his hands on a shop towel like the old habit it still was sometimes. He crossed the floor, tall and composed, in a navy suit that fit like decision. It's good to meet you. Her mother blinked, then smiled in a way that looked like surrendering an old, wrong story. You built this with our daughter. With your daughter, he said simply. She built it. Her father shook his hand, grip firm. I taught 30 years of kids who were told their work didn't count, he said. This looks like the opposite. We try, Malik replied. Ava's mother looked around again, soaking in the whiteboard, the stacks of calculators, the view that wasn't pretty so much as purposeful. It's not fancy, she said, searching for a word that wouldn't wound. It's honest, Ava said. Her mother nodded, pearls catching light. Honest is better. The plant dripped onto Jose's shoe. He laughed and rescued it. Her parents stayed for an hour, long enough to watch Malik explain risk like weather, and to see Ava take a call from a retiree and leave her voice low, level and kind. They left with lighter faces. On the way out, her mother touched the plaque with 2 fingers, as if reading Braille. We're proud, she whispered to the wall as much as to the room. The door shut. Ava exhaled a breath she hadn't known she was holding. You okay? Malik asked. They came to see, she said, and they saw. The day spun. At noon a message flashed. Urgent. Mrs. Dominguez. The widow who'd cried at their first meeting had a daughter in a car accident. Minor, but the hospital wanted a card on file and her fear had expanded into finances. Ava and Malik went in person. The apartment smelled like simmering tomatoes and worry. Ava sat at the small kitchen table with the woman while Malik fixed a cabinet hinge that had been loose since winter. You won't sell the index fund, Ava said, drawing boxes on a paper towel. We'll move cash from the cushion into a 1-week bill and back. No penalty. No panic. Breathe with me. Mrs. Dominguez breathed. Then she laughed. You don't wear the big office, she said to Ava, eyes wise, but you carry it. On the drive back, rain turned to sun in a way that always felt like forgiveness. Malik drove one-handed, the other resting on his thigh. Ava watched his fingers, steady as metronomes, and felt the newness of the world press behind her eyes. "Do you ever miss the marble?" he asked. "I missed the elevators because everyone looked ahead," she said. No one had to watch their feet. She glanced at him. "Now I like watching my feet. I like deciding where they go." He smiled. "Me too." The email from the port came late, quarterly review scheduled at Union Hall, not boardroom, by request. Ava read it twice. "They want us on folding chairs," she said. "Where we do our best work," Malik replied. Union Hall smelled like coffee that had regretted its choices and old banners that remembered better days. The trustees sat in metal chairs with their coats on their laps. The back row was a mishmash of retirees and grandkids, and one teen in a hoodie taking notes like his life depended on it. Apex showed up in suits that looked offended by fluorescent light. Ava didn't stand at a podium. She stood in the aisle, curves unapologetic, hair in a low twist, sleeves rolled like a mechanic. Jose handed out calculators. Sierra drew risk bands on a paper flip chart with a thick marker that bled. May fielded questions about why it feels like the market punishes me for doing the right thing, and answered with patience that turned resentment into understanding. Robert tried once. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice pitching for authority. "Institutional stewardship. Just a minute," said a man in a ball cap with union pins down the brim. "The microphone belongs to the teacher right now." A wave of laughter. The microphone returned to Ava. She looked around and thought, "This is the room I was meant for." She talked them through the quarter, through the times discipline feels like neglect, through why buying feels like betrayal when the news yells sell. She didn't flatter. She didn't scold. She treated every person like a person. After, the chair shook her hand. "We took a risk," she said. "It paid. Keep paying." On their walk back to the car, the city breathed that late evening breath when neon wakes and people uncurl. Malik stopped under a streetlight stained gold. "You know what I thought today?" he asked. "What?" "That we did not ask for permission to be here. We proved we belonged, and then we invited everyone anyway." Ava laughed, throat tight. "Says the man who used to polish conference tables into mirrors. You were always here." The room just finally caught up. They reached the new office to find Sierra asleep on the couch with a spreadsheet open on her chest, May watching a volatility chart like a lullaby, Jose writing on index cards. "Demystify, don't diminish." They covered Sierra with a blanket and turned off the screen. Quiet held, deep and earned. "Stay," Malik said, not a command, not even a request, a truth. "I am," she said, and crossed the small distance which felt like oceans. He kissed her like a decision, sure and slow. No theatre, the taste of peppermint tea and the day's last doubt fading. She answered with the steadiness he'd taught her to trust, her hands at his jaw, feeling the faint scar with her thumb like a history lesson. When they parted, the room had not changed, but the future had. "We have to be smart," she said, breathless and smiling. "Policies. Boundaries. Our team." "Gets the truth," he said. "We write a code. We live it. Co-founders who also choose each other. Process for love, too." She laughed into his shoulder, the sound startling and free. "Process for love," she repeated. "You would turn this into a checklist." He grinned. "Step 1, admit it." "I love you," she said. No pivot, no hedge. It felt like placing capital where she most believed. "I love you," he said back, and she felt the words slot into place like a key turned. They drafted the policy on the whiteboard. Disclosure, decision rights, veto power for the team on conflicts, an agreement to put mission before ego and relationship before pride. Sierra woke and read it, bleary-eyed. "Healthy," she said, approving. Jose clapped once like a man in church. May added a line, "When in doubt, tell the truth sooner." Months ran like water in a good gutter. Fast, directed, useful. They opened the Hayes Sterling Financial Literacy Centre on a corner that had held a payday lender for too long. The ribbon was a piece of caution tape they cut with utility scissors. The sign was hand-painted by a retiree who'd learned compound interest and rediscovered his brushes. People came. People learned. People stayed to teach others. Apex kept needling. The paper tried another story. It didn't land. Numbers did. Word did. The fern revived in the lobby, contrite and thriving. On a Sunday morning, Ava found herself on the office floor with a roll of butcher paper mapping Year 2. A scholarship fund, a quarterly report written at an 8th grade reading level, without dumbing down a single idea. a push into neighbourhoods Banks avoided. Malik lay beside her, propped on one elbow, pen tapping his lip. "Add one more line," he said. "What?" "Joy," he replied, "not as an outcome." She wrote it in thick letters. Then she looked at him. At the man who had walked into a conference room pushing a cart and into her life like a question that deserved an answer, and she felt the old language fall from her like a coat cut too small. "Do you remember," she asked, "the day I said, 'Should I be the one falling this time?'" "I do," he said. "I was wrong," she said, smiling. "We weren't falling. We were finally choosing gravity." He reached for her hand. "And look where it holds."